Hey everyone, welcome back to Encounter. I'm so glad that you're joining us for today's Sunday service. Right after this intro, we're going to go into our Worship Reimagined, and this one is offered by my family and myself. And so I really hope that you will give our family a lot of grace. We're not the best singers, we're not the best musicians, but we wanted to show this with the general theme in mind as our life as living worship. And so even though that we are singing, you'll see us singing and playing some instruments. We may not have the greatest voice, but the practice that went into it and how we are trying to live that out as my wife hosts other people and she cooks and uses that as a worship to God, as a fragrant offering to bless people by giving them home-cooked meals. For my daughter who uses her art skills, and my son who once he puts his mind to something, he just tries his best to do as best as possible. And for myself, just playing an instrument that I haven't played in so long, but the practice that went behind it so that we could share this with you. I hope that you'll see this as living worship. I encourage you to be blessed, and I hope that you enjoy our service today.
I need you to soften my heart, break me apart. I need you to open my eyes and see that you're shaping my life. And all I am, I surrender. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm need you. I need you to open and break me apart. I need you to pierce through the dark and cleanse every part of me. All I am and all I am, I surrender. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. I give you everything, Jesus. I may be weak, 'cause I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. 'Cause I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. And my flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good, 'cause your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Oh, give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. But your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. And my flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. 'Cause I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. 'Cause I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. Never let me down. You're right beside me. No, you never let me down. You're here in this moment. No, you never let me down. You're right beside me. You never let me down. You're right here. Never let me down.
I hope you guys enjoyed our worship and you were able to experience God through that. Just a few announcements that I'd like to go through. Again, we're on social media and we love to connect with you there. You can find us at Encounter Covenant Church through the platforms of Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. On YouTube, you can find all of our videos there, and we encourage you, please do subscribe. For those of you who would like to pray, we do have various different prayer gatherings that we do on Sunday morning. We do it also on the last Thursday of every month. And if you have specific prayer requests, we would love to pray for you. You can send it to prayer@encountercc.ca. That's prayer@encountercc.ca. For those of you who are continually giving, we encourage you to continually give through e-transfer at donate@covchurch.ca. That's donate@covchurch.ca. In the memo line, please put Encounter Church. If you are giving outside of Canada, please do give to the Canada Helps website that's provided on screen. We have a special event campaign that we've been doing, and it's going to lead up and into Thanksgiving. And we really have this theme in mind that says, and that he gave. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. We see that there's an attitude of love that simply gives. And we want to reflect that in our own giving as well. So we have this opportunity to buy groceries for people who are around us. There's 3 ways that you can participate in this campaign of Thanksgiving that we want to have done by October 4th. And it's this. The first way is if you know any individuals or any families around you that could use a box of groceries for Thanksgiving Day, please recommend that person to your small group leader during your small group time on Sunday. Please recommend that person, and then we will get in touch and we will make sure that we will buy the supplies, the groceries, and deliver it to them. The second way you can help out is you may not know anyone, but financially you are doing well and you can donate. So if you want to give a financial donation so that we can purchase all of these things, you can do so through the e-transfer at donate@covchurch.ca. But in the memo line, please put Encounter, then dash Thanksgiving Outreach. Encounter dash Thanksgiving Outreach. Lastly, if you want to help out, you can also do so by the pickup of the groceries, sorting them in boxes, and then helping us with delivery as well. So those are the 3 different ways that you can help out if you feel that this is something that you would like to participate in. We also want to encourage you to sign up for our studies that begin in October. This is the last week that you can sign up. So please do. Either it's the Alpha course, the Philippians Bible study, or the Experiencing God discipleship. If you haven't signed up, please do so this week. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the sermon. Today's passage comes from Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 28. Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 28. I'll be reading from the NIV. I'd like to invite you to follow along. It reads this. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. So Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to the king Darius and said to him, Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, May your God, whom you serve, continually rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation may not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertaining, and without entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? Daniel answered, May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I done anything wrong before you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree in every part of my kingdom. People must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. No, I don't know about you, but one of the things that I really don't like about my own personality is my timidity. This past week, my timidity, even though it's displayed here and there and I get upset by it at times, my timidity really surprised me in just an everyday act of what I did during this week. I was at this dog park, and as I was playing with my dog, we went into the fenced area, and as soon as my dog was running around, he began sniffing around and began to go to a certain spot. And when I went over to see what he was sniffing, it was a big pile of dog poo. At that moment, I got so angry at whatever irresponsible owner there was that would allow their dog to go take a dump in the dog park without having the decency of cleaning it up. And as I was kind of stewing in that anger, I remember thinking to myself, I said, man, if I was only here to see who or what kind of owner does these kind of these things, I would give them a piece of my mind. As my dog Obi was getting tired and he was ready to leave, I took him, and as I was leaving towards my car, there was another car that just pulled up, and they came out with their dog, and they were walking towards not the dog park, but the baseball field. And as they were walking towards a baseball field, and as I saw them from a distance, I saw that their dog began to take a dump right in front of the stands. And so as I was putting Obi in the car and I was closing it, I looked over to see what the owner would do, and the owner just left the poo there. And I was so distressed again. And so for me, having that thought of, as if I was here to see whatever previous owner left their dog poo there, I would let them have a piece of my mind. I was so shocked that I became timid. They were already far off, and I already had loaded my dog into the car. And because of my timidity, I didn't yell out and say, hey, make sure you pick up your dog poo because other people are going to step in it. Pick it up. Have some decency. Rather than that, I became a little bit timid. I didn't want to approach it. I didn't want to walk over to that guy and confront him. And he was with his girlfriend at this time. And I didn't want to embarrass him in front of his girlfriend too by demanding or creating a scene. And I ended up just leaving. And as I left, I began stewing in my own anger in the car as I drove home. The reason why I began to stew in my own anger wasn't so much because of what he did, but because of my timidity. Why was I so timid? My thoughts began to go into thinking about that baseball diamond later on that night because I have a son that plays baseball, and I could just imagine other baseball kids playing around and then having their game ruined because they inadvertently stepped into someone's dog poo that was right in front of the baseball stands. I was so upset that I was so timid about this. I began to kind of spiritualize the whole experience and said to myself, wow, my timidity will indirectly cause other people to step in someone else's poo. When I began to think a little bit more about that, I decided, you know what? I can't let that stand like that. And so as my penance, what I did, because I said, I don't want to be timid about things like this. I want to be able to do what is right. I want the courage to be able to do things that are right. As my penance, the next morning when I was walking Obi again and brought him to the park, I went to clean it up because I don't want to be cleaning up dog poo or other people's dog poop for the rest of my life. And so I wanted that to serve as my reminder. Don't be timid. Have courage. Be courageous so that other people don't end up stepping on other people's poo. So, okay, right by now I'm guessing that you're all thinking, that's a great story, but what does this have to do with Daniel and the lion's den? Well, in today's passage, what I saw in Daniel's life was the opposite of timidity. I saw what Daniel had was courage. It amazes me how courageous Daniel was in his situation. And I began to think, what are some of the things that I can learn from Daniel so that I can move out of my timidity and learn how to be more courageous in my life? And because I hate timidity so much, the reason why I hate timidity so much is because I found that timidity, it actually paralyzes me. It keeps me from doing anything. And in our in-between times, when we live in this in-between, sometimes our own timidity about ourselves, our self-worth, what we can actually accomplish, and the things that go in our head, should we do this, should we not do this, and we end up not doing anything, sometimes that's a form of our own timidity, of taking a risk in life, or believing what we can do, if we have the courage to actually do it. Timidity keeps us paralyzed, and we begin to stew in our own disappointment in ourselves. I don't want to live like that. And not only that, I definitely don't want to live a timid faith that might cause other people around me to stumble in spiritual poo. We see this life poo that people can stumble in because of my timidity. But I don't want other people to stumble spiritually because of my spiritual timidity. So when we live in this in-between, we must practice this courage of Daniel and to throw off the timidity that we have in our lives. In our in-betweens are already discouraging as it is. So let's use the time that we have. Let's use our in-betweens to live with courage. So the first insight that I see from Daniel that that helped establish his kind of courage in faith is that he was consistent and had integrity no matter what came in his life. Daniel was consistent and he had integrity in no matter what came in his life. Anyone can be fair weather faith people. When the weather is fair, when the weather is good, when the circumstances are nice around us, anyone can look as if they are strong Christians. Anyone can look as if faith inside of them is strong. But what marks that difference is when that storm comes, when those problems come, when life gets difficult, that really shows our true colors. There are two main distinctives that I see of fair weather faith people. Here are two distinctives that I see. The first one is this. Fair weather faith people, they declare more than what is practiced. They declare more than what is practiced. In other words, there's more air than substance in what they proclaim. It's like making these bold statements by saying, yeah, if you ask a Christian, a fair weather Christian, the question, hey, do you believe the Bible is an important part of your life? They will say, of course, the Bible is so important to me. But in real life, when it comes down to it, spending time in the Word of God may be the last thing that they do. They push it off as their very last priority if they even get to read the Bible on a daily basis or even on a weekly basis. How about this one? We hear this a lot when we're going to church. We hear, oh yeah, thanks so much for that update. I'll pray for you. I've used that expression so many times too, where I say, I pray for you. But the thing is, do I mean it? Am I really going to engage in prayer? Or is it more air than substance? Fair weather faith people have that kind of attitude where we throw things out and we declare things more than we practice it. Compare this with Daniel. When we look at verse 5, it said this, no one could find anything to charge Daniel with. All the satraps, all the administration, imagine this. He was one of the top 3 guys in this expanding Babylonian empire. Imagine the loads of responsibility that Daniel had, not only personally, not only in government, not only in raising leaders, not only managing conflict among his fellow leaders, and then instituting new policies and laws and all this kind of stuff. Daniel never faltered. It's amazing. Not even these people who knew more things about the Babylonian Empire than Daniel did, Daniel never faltered. If you gave a task to Daniel, he carried it through. He never brought anything back half-baked. It was always done. He had substance. If he said he was going to do it, he actually did it. The Bible says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. What Daniel was practicing is that he was living out the words that he thought and the words that he communicated. Daniel made sure there was consistency with what he said and how he lived. When we practice living into our words and our thoughts, we too, like Daniel, we become substantive, meaning we become solid. We have more trust and faith in who we are because we see no difference, no distinction between what we say we are and what we actually do. The reason why I faltered at the dog park is because even though I say at that place, at that moment that I would give that person a piece of my mind, I'm really deep inside timid. I'm scared at other people's opinion. What will they think of me? And I allow that to paralyze me. But when I begin to practice more what I say that I will do, because that becomes more substantive in me, and I become more solid in who I am, it helps solidify how I live. So what I think is actually what I do. And I don't act by timidity, but I act by truth. I act by courage because there is no other way that I can act because I'm that solid person. The second distinctive that we see is that in fair weather faith is that there's always an excuse for everything. Have you guys ever did that before? I'm sure some of you guys are probably like me, that you make excuses for anything in your life. That's what fair weather faith people do. You see, if I drop the ball on some things, or if I don't follow through with my convictions or live according to my values, I always find there's an excuse that I can lean on, that I can make for myself. Oh, I was so busy this week, right? And because of my busyness, I couldn't do that. But you understand, right? We all have busy times, right? I always find an excuse. Other excuses might be, oh, you know what? I wasn't feeling too well this week. And so because I wasn't feeling too well, I just couldn't get to it. We find ways to make an excuse for our own failures, for our own irresponsibility, for our own timidity or lack of courage. We always find an excuse. My excuse when leaving dog park was, oh, it's too far. I don't want to yell. I don't want to upset the whole situation. Oh, it's probably bad on me to do that right now. I will always find an excuse. That's what fair weather Christians do. That's what timid people like me do. But look at verse 10. Look at what it says. As soon as Daniel heard about the decree issued, he didn't skip a beat, but went straight to his room, opened up his windows that was facing Jerusalem, and he prayed to God, and he was doing this 3 times a day. The very moment Daniel heard that the decree was issued, he kept up with his own practice of praying 3 times a day. Even in the face of death, Daniel didn't use that as an excuse to stop praying to God. That would be an advisable excuse for any other person, right? If anybody came to me and said, Eddie, you know what? I couldn't pray today because as soon as I did, someone said that they were going to kill me. I was like, oh my goodness, I understand. Of course not. For Daniel, that wasn't even an excuse. He says, no. God is my primary relationship, the primary one with whom I have loyalty to. It's the very last thing that I would ever compromise. Can you imagine? I can try to imagine myself being in like an accountability group with Daniel, where, at the end of the meeting, we said, yeah, we'll pray for one another. Let's share our prayer requests. And then next week when we come, let's update each other. And then the next week comes and, if my kids were sick that week, right? And I was really busy because I was driving to the hospital or my kids were throwing up at home and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't really have time. Well, probably I could make time, but, I want to make excuses. So I made the excuse. And so I meet with Daniel and I said, Daniel, I know I said I prayed for you, but I want to share with you what happened this week. I fell, my kids fell sick. They're throwing up. I was driving forth from the hospital. My work, is like jumbled mess. And then my home life. And I'm just trying to get things ordered. But I'm so sorry, but I couldn't pray for you this week. But I'll definitely pray for you this following week. Imagine Daniel's response to me. He goes, oh yeah, Eddie, no problem. Of course I understand. But I want to share with you what happened to me last week. Last week, my own country issued a decree that said anyone who prays, right, would be thrown and be into this lion den and be executed. But Eddie, because I promised I was going to pray for you, I still prayed for you. And guess what? They threw me into the lion's den to be executed, but my God saved me. And I was still able to pray for you. But Eddie, your kid sickness and your busyness, yeah, that's all fine. I understand. Imagine how Daniel would respond to my types of excuses. But this is what I've grown. This is what I've grown to accept in my own life, that I have all of these excuses. Brothers and sisters, we have got to stop making excuses for ourselves and begin living into who God declares us to be. In our in-betweens, stop making excuses. Let's stop making excuses. Let's stop blaming things on all these. We understand the system is broken. We understand life around us is broken. But let's not make an excuse for ourselves and remain paralyzed. Let's be courageous and live into who God declares us to be. The second insight that I gained from Daniel is that courage unlocks what we previously thought was impossible. The second insight that we gained from Daniel is that courage unlocks what we previously thought was impossible. I'm sure if you asked Daniel, do you think you'll be able to survive if they threw you into the lion's pit? I'm pretty sure Daniel said, there's no way any human could survive being thrown into a pit of hungry lions. And I'm sure no one ever wants to experience anything like that. But courage is what placed Daniel in that undesirable circumstance. Because he was courageous, it put him into a circumstance that Daniel did not want to be in. In other words, what we see happening in Daniel's life is because of Daniel's courage, because of his integrity, his life actually got worse before it got better. Daniel's life, we see, it actually got temporarily worse than before it actually got better. For many of us, our courage may lead us into a more difficult circumstance. It may lead us into a more difficult position, just as it had for Daniel. But without courage, but if Daniel did not live with courage, he would have never experienced this angel being sent to shut the mouths of the lions so that Daniel would not be harmed. Can you imagine that? His courage placed him into an undesirable situation, but in that undesirable situation, he experienced something of God's power and presence that he hadn't experienced before. And in the same way, when we look at ourselves, when we have the courage to do something, it tells us, it pushes us to really depend on God even more, to trust in Him, to believe, Lord, you are the one that calls me to be this, to be who I am. And I want to live into who you call me to be. And I need courage to do that. But even if I'm placed in my own lion's den, even if I'm placed in a difficult situation, I want to experience in that place, even though I don't want to be there, I want to experience your power and your presence. Look at what this did for Daniel's faith. As soon as the king came, when the time was over, and he had the stone rolled away, and he asked, Daniel, are you still there? Daniel exclaims, my God kept me safe. He sent an angel. I spent the night with an angel who shut the mouths of the lions so that I would not be harmed. I'm in complete good health. Brothers and sisters, sometimes our courage leads us into places where we don't want to be, but we end up not being harmed as we thought we would be. We end up experiencing what we previously thought was impossible. We see it as a possibility. We see God's work in our life. We begin to understand what Paul said when he says in Corinthians, I'm oppressed but not crushed. I'm persecuted but not abandoned. I'm struck down but not destroyed. We really experience what that means in our life. That yes, we are struck down but we're not destroyed. We're oppressed but we're not crushed by the things that surround us because God keeps us. He holds us. Can you imagine what this did for Daniel's faith? Can you imagine what this did? And we can together what this did for King Darius's faith. It says that King Darius was so impressed that even though he himself declared himself to be a god, look what he says. He comes out giving this sudden praise to God, and he sends it to all the nations. And he says, I issued a decree in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. He is the living God and he endures forever. This is someone who does not believe in the Yahweh God and who sees himself as a God. He says, there is no one who is like Daniel's God. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. And look at the concluding words in verse 28. It says, and so Daniel prospered. See, brothers and sisters, when we choose to live with integrity and courage, we may experience some anxiousness. We may experience some pushback at that time. But we're called to stay the course. And as we stay the course, it makes us solid. It makes us authentic. It gives us substance to our faith. We're not just a hot air balloon that makes all these declarations, but there's no follow through. It's who we are. We can't help but be who we are. This not help being able to not help be who you are. It's what leads you out of your in-between. Because you now have the courage and not the timidity to be paralyzed, but you have the courage to keep moving forward. What you previously think is impossible to get out of this desert, it's impossible to get out of this hole, it's impossible for me to get out of my in-between. Now because of this courage in believing who God calls you to be, to live in obedience to Christ, not make excuses for yourself. When we live in this way, we begin to experience God's power and presence in our lives so that we may prosper. We may live life and live it to the full so that we are not stuck simply in our in-betweens. Brothers and sisters, what gets us through our in-betweens is by living our life with integrity and courage, just as we see Daniel doing. It takes courage to get us out of our in-betweens. And it takes courage to live the life God has called each and every one of us to live. But when we live our life with courage, we can always experience God's great purpose for our life and His power and His presence directing and keeping your life. Let's pray. Father, I thank you so much for giving us this time and this space to go through your word, to learn about our in-betweens through the lens of Daniel, this lens of courage, that it takes courage, Father Lord. And I pray, Father Lord, that rather than timidity, you said you have not given us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power and of love and of sound mind. I pray for each and every one of my brothers and sisters that are listening at this time, will you take away, Father Lord, will you help them to lay down their spirit of timidity, Father Lord. May you help them, Father Lord, to push that away, Father Lord, and to live their life, especially in their in-betweens, especially in their discouragement. Live their life with integrity and courage, to live their life, Father Lord, with courage, with sound mind, with power, and with love. Father, may we live into that, Lord. You have not given us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power and of love and the sound mind. Father, I pray this grace and this blessing on everyone who hears this message today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thanks again for joining us today for today's Sunday worship. Right after, we do have our small groups over Zoom. And as we gather as a church together, if you don't have that link and you love to see who we are, especially if you're joining us online, but you've never really shown who you are and you would like to get connected with our community, we love to meet you. And we love to connect with you. So please do reach out to us at hello@encountercc.ca. And we love to plug you in. We love to give you that invite and get to know you more and walk alongside of you as you grow in your faith. Have a great week, everyone.